Okay, I think we're in business. Do we have our court reporter?
He's here.
Yes,
All
I'm
right.
here.
All right. Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jan Beecher, Interim Commissioner at the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. I'm joined today by my wonderful colleagues, Chairman Tom Wheel, Interim Commissioner Holly Cheeseman, and I believe we'll be joined momentarily by Interim Commissioner Everett Smith. I'd like to welcome you to our technical meeting for docket number 26-01-19, consideration of submission forms for water quality and treatment adjustment proceedings. We are convening to discuss the proposed forms for these filings. As participants are likely aware, the WQTA process is a recovery mechanism for costs incurred to remediate water sources impacted by new regulations, especially the PFAS, depending on your preference, contamination. Part of the process is an initial filing to show project sites, initial monitoring results for PFAS, and cost estimates. There's also an annual filing to reconcile the project costs, updated PFAS levels for project sites, and calculating the annual WQTA surcharge. Before we move into the discussion, I'll highlight a couple of housekeeping notes. First of all PURA proceedings are transcribed. We have our court reporter with us today. To preserve the robustness of our record, we ask that you identify yourself by name and affiliation when it is your turn to speak. Second, please refrain from using the Zoom chat function. It is not transcribed and part of our official record for today. However, that said, please feel free to use the raise hand function to ask questions. We're hoping for good engagement around these issues, so please do that. And that's located at the bottom of the screen in the React tab. So I believe today we have representatives from Connecticut Water Company, Aquarian Water Company, and Hazardville and Jewett Water Companies. And then I believe I saw OCC on the line. And so we will have an opportunity to hear from them as well as other stakeholders and members of the public that may want to provide comment. So before we move into the substance of today's meeting, I'd ask that any council present and enter their appearances for the record at this time. And when doing so, take a moment to introduce any others who are online who might be participating in today's meeting. Anybody want to go first?
I'll go. Good morning,
Thanks.
Commissioners. Andrew Minikowski for the Office of Consumer Counsel, and I'm joined by Albert Sobolewski and Rich Sobolewski from the OCC, who will be participating in the conversation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to state appearances? I guess we're okay with that procedurally then. All right, very good. Thanks, everyone. So now I'll turn the technical meeting over to Mr. Mark Benedetti, who is PURA's lead staff for this docket. Mr. Benedetti will go over today's agenda for the technical meeting. Mr. Benedetti, take it away. And I believe he'll be showing slides for as we get into the form, so we'll all have those in front of us as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Beecher. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating in today's session on the proposed water quality and treatment adjustment forms, WQTA. These forms are intended to support a consistent and transparent regulatory process for WQTA recovery for water quality improvement projects. As Commissioner Beecher stated, specifically this is under Public Act 25-142. PURA appreciates your participation in this process as we develop these forms. I'm going to walk you through each form, explain how it fits into the WQTA process, and highlight areas where we are seeking your feedback. The forms and process are based on the WICA mechanism, however, adjusted for WQTA. It's important to note a major difference between WQTA and WICA is that WQTA projects are recoverable for costs incurred, as opposed to needing to wait until projects are used and useful, as is the case for WICA. The WQTA mechanisms allow utilities to recover eligible PFAS-related costs, as well as those related to pollutants that are subject to state or federal drinking water regulations adopted or amended after December 16th, 2021, outside of general rate cases. The mechanism itself is a surcharge on customers' bills that shall not exceed 15% of the water company's annual retail water revenues approved in its most recent rate filing, and shall not exceed 7.5% of such revenues for any 12-month period. The forms we're reviewing today represent the proposed structure that Pure would use to receive information, review company calculated charges, surcharges, and reconcile revenues. Before we look at each form, let me just situate them in the overall flow of a WQTA filing. First is the initial filing, in which a company will seek project eligibility, present monitoring results, project proposals, timelines, and cost estimates. From there, the authority will review that initial filing in a Water Quality and Treatment Assessment Report, also known as the WQTA-R decision. Then there is the annual filing, similar to the semi-annual filings in the WICA process. This is where the WQTA surcharge is determined based on the costs incurred, which will be evaluated using the forms we're discussing today. As with WICA, there is also an annual reconciliation process and a corresponding form for that. So no questions at this time. I'm going to move ahead and show the first form. Okay, I hope this is viewable for everyone. What you're looking at would be WQTA 01, Part 1. Part 1 should be familiar to those of you who filled out a WICA reconciliation. Provides basic company information, including your annual retail revenues and the 7.5% and 15% cost caps tied to those revenues. And before we begin discussion, I'm just going to skip ahead to Part 2 here, which is connected to WQTA 01, where we're going to get a lot more data-intensive information from this form. It'll be a list of all the WQTA projects, the project phase, the type of PFAS treatment, be it activated carbon, ion exchange, or interconnection. Your PFAS samples low and high ranges relative to the maximum contamination level. Any Connecticut Department of Health subsidy status for that project. How the solids or liquid residuals will be handled. Estimated and actual costs for the project. Financing, depreciation, property tax, and income tax components. I'll slide over so we can see this further. It's all calculated. And then prior recoveries. And a slide for any commentaries you might want to add for a project. It's a very important form to give a big overview of much of the information necessary to review WQTA. I'm open to discussion now on this form and to hear any thoughts from the companies, OCC, or any other parties. Mr. Dixon, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, so I think as you guys are aware, we're sort of I'll say we jumped the gun a little bit on a lot of this, in that we are already in the midst of our annual filing. So a lot of what's on this form was sort of assembled in our initial filing that's already received a final decision from the authority. The one thing I wanted to sort of add is, as we got in the midst of our annual filing, we recommended, and what's currently in our live docket, are a couple additional columns to what's on here. And again, this form was designed to be as comprehensive as possible to get as much information on there as possible. The columns that we added that I would suggest the authority consider for incorporation are near columns J and K. So J and K relate to some of the sampling results, and we added 2 additional columns to the right of those. And I'm going to ask Ms. Bergman, who's also with Connecticut Water, to address why it's important to add those additional columns.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Troy, and thank you, commissioners. So we added 2 additional columns next to J and K, as Troy mentioned. And what we did was we indicated that in the first 2 columns, they would represent the initial monitoring. So it would look the same as you have here with running annual average calculated in both of those columns, but they're duplicated so that the first two are for initial monitoring, and then the second two are for ongoing compliance. And the reason we felt it was helpful to add these additional two columns is because the regulations outline a timeline for the initial monitoring period during which utilities are responsible for collecting the initial results, quarterly or biannual, depending on the system size, and that the initial monitoring period, which ends April 2027, would be used initially to determine whether a project was eligible. But then after that, the utility will go into the ongoing compliance period where we'll continue collecting quarterly or biannual samples and use those updated results moving forward.
So there were those two columns, and then we also added two columns basically to the far right of the spreadsheet at the very end. And those columns were basically a flag for the eligibility determination as well as the date of the eligibility determination. And the reason we did that was that in our initial assessment report, in the final decision, certain projects were deemed as eligible for recovery under WQTA, and some were determined to be ineligible. But the reality is, as the assessment report is a living, breathing document based on sampling results, it's likely that some of those projects that are currently ineligible will be deemed eligible in a future filing. So we wanted to preserve, especially if we're asking for recovery of certain costs for our projects, when that project was determined to be eligible. So we added that more for a helpful reference as we move forward. And I say we added these columns. The best place to see these is within our current docket, which is 230832 WQ02 is the docket. And then there's an interrogatory response, which is RSR3 Exhibit 1. So that basically shows this very comprehensive format with our additional columns. The only thing I'll note is this version here has added 4 of its own additional columns related to income tax recovery, which we are very fine with those being added. But those would be the only other differences you would see to what we put in our current filing.
Great. Thank you very much. That's really great to go over. And I see Mr. Albert Slizblowski, you have your hand raised as well.
Good morning, Albert Slizblowski for the OCC. If we scroll all the way down to note 3, under the notes, yes, that mentions high and low columns. I'm not sure where that is because it is not indicated in the column headings.
Oh, I see. I think that was probably a holdover from a former iteration of the form.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. We will address that.
And then if we go to, I believe it is note 2, it says that there are 2 types of treatment for PFAS. I mean, I believe this should be possibly rewarded to say the 2 most common types of treatment. I believe there's more than 2. Also,
I think that's, yep, go ahead.
in that same section, if we look at note 6, is it possible for the companies to verify that the ion exchange resins can be regenerated in Connecticut and that resin regeneration will not be available in the coming years? This spreadsheet will be out. I mean, ideally, once the resin is exhausted, it could be regenerated and reused. Is that correct?
I'll turn to the companies for their subject matter expertise on this.
This is Dan. So that's echoing. Sorry. So regeneration can occur. Ion exchange for ion exchange. In Connecticut, we have to do something.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that at all. I don't know if anybody else is having trouble hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're having trouble with your audio, Mr. Lawrence. Can
Any
anyone
better?
else respond to this question at this time?
Just speak to what Connecticut Water is planning to do. You know, as Troy mentioned, we've submitted the filing, and so I think some of these details we had discussed previously. Our plans are according to the notes here on the spreadsheet, so we do not plan to regenerate IX. We plan to work with IX vendors to switch out media. It may be possible to regenerate. I'm unfortunately not as well versed in that, but as far as our plan at Connecticut Water, we will switch out the media.
Thank you.
And so, oh, okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
my-
Mark.
This is Dan Lawrence. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. Somehow I logged in twice. So I agree with Lauren. Brian, for the most part, we'll be doing change outs. We are evaluating regeneration. Regeneration results in lower life for the next change out, and the change outs have costs to them. So that's something that's still being explored, as we're all kind of at the infancy of this in terms of what can be done and where can it end up, right? For disposal, regeneration, what does that mean? I was talking to a vendor the other day who said he can regenerate ion exchange, which is kind of new to me overall, whether that's actually a viable concept. So we're still kind of in the figuring that out as well. Right now we are exchanging the media in a sense, getting replacement where we need it. So.
Thank you. And sort of my last question on maybe here is what appears should consider taking out any mention of PFAS and changing it to pollutant of concern if this is meant to be a universal table. I mean, if it is left in, maybe it should be clarified that this form is just for changes due to high level of PFAS.
Some good note. We will consider that, especially since it is supposed to be for any new regulation going forward.
That's it for this one.
Okay, great. And I did have a question for you, Mr. Sobolewski. Do you recommend allowing some flexibility in the note regarding IX residual media? So that is something that's possible to change in the future?
I believe so. I mean, hearing what Mr. Lawrence has said, the current plan versus what happens in the future might be a little bit different. So I believe that some flexibility in that and optionality should be left in.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Dan Lawrence, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, so I agree. So as I was going through this table, I was unclear how we would actually address, as Albert had said, other projects overall, whether we have to use not applicable, whether you're doing pH adjustment for corrosion control related to lead in the revised lead rules, right? Or you're doing some other rule. It's very difficult, or even an interconnection, how that would actually fit well in the form. So I just wanted to make sure we don't run into problems later trying to shove something into a form that doesn't make sense. My other question related to this is the rolling averages and how that's reported. Is that going to be reported as the way that compliance is set up, or is that reported as just actual values? So for example, if you have a value less than 4, EPA's compliance makes it 0, but you also have a sample at 3.9, which if you have results are around 3.9, you're probably treating, right? So that's what I was trying to understand what the rolling average would actually be associated with. And is rolling average defined as quarterly, semi-annual, as Lauren was describing, what they're doing, because you have people that may not even have started quarterly monitoring or only part of the way through that. So just questions that I had, and to that you don't have to instantly answer them right now, but something to consider what rolling average means.
There, and that's a great question. It's one it's discussed heavily in the in CWC's decision, WQTAR. Rolling average would be calculated based on results during an annual period. I think for reporting in the test results, we have it written down that we want the actual value. But I rely on the EPA regulations for calculating that running annual average.
Right, but that would, for example, you could have a five, and then have 2 results under, and those would be resulted in under 4, and those would be zeros. And I don't think that's what you're trying to capture. You're trying to capture, if you want to capture compliance under the EPA rule and actual results, I think you should have 2 columns, right? Because it's 2 different questions. Like, because just because you get a 0 in one quarter doesn't mean you're going to get the 0 next quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might have jumped to 7. You're in parts per trillion, so the volatility of the data is quite problematic, if you will. So just my thoughts on how that gets presented, so that everyone presents it the same way.
I think that's great input and something we'll definitely consider, especially that 2-column idea. That you had might be a good addition to this.
Yeah, and if I could just add that at the conclusion of today's conference, we will be inviting correspondence where some of these ideas, you'll have the chance to submit those to us in writing with examples of what you're talking about. If you're talking about, say, refining a table, adding columns, maybe sharpening some of the labels, that's something that we can certainly take those into consideration as we make final revisions. And I think this is going to be challenging. I mean, because I think in terms of thinking about the different types of contaminants that fall under these categories, and as those have been defined under the Safe Drinking Water Act, federal and state rules. And then, a thing that I want to raise at some point is how a treatment technology or project addresses, or has benefits or addresses issues beyond a single contamination. Because I think ultimately that's going to be important to understand as well. How we incorporate that here, I don't know. And then one last comment is for all of you who do have to, because you do have to comply with both these requirements, but obviously also the Safe Drinking Water Act rules and requirements, making sure that we're consistent. I think that would be, so there's, harmonious labeling and treatment of particular issues. I think that would be a positive thing. So feel free to flag anything there that you might want us to be aware of.
Thank you. Before we move on, is there any other comments or questions regarding Form WQTA-1? Okay. In that case, I'm going to move forward to WQTA-02. I'll zoom in on this a little bit. This form captures year-end summaries of all WQTA eligible projects that the company is seeking recovery for. It's a more detailed way of summarizing WQTA-1 Part 2, focused just on eligible projects. Any thoughts here, initial thoughts upon reviewing this form? Troy Dixon, I see your hand.
Yeah, so just to be clear, do you want this to be in-service projects? Because I see section 2 is listed as completed projects. Is it anything we're getting recovery on, or is it specifically supposed to be the in-service piece?
Believe it should be that should be updated to QTA eligible
Okay.
instead of completed. However, that does bring up a point that we are asking for actual documented costs incurred, not accrued. Does that make sense to you? Is that feasible?
So as we're submitting our annual forms and at the end of the year, there's a $500,000 of accrued invoices or something, we would not submit those for recovery. Is that your suggestion? Because it may be a
I'm just
cost
asking if
for the
that's,
folks.
would that be feasible for you?
We can certainly do it.
Okay.
That's, yeah. I think as we went through some of the interrogatories in this current annual filing, which asked for sort of a documentation of costs, I think, we thought it made sense that sort of the report that lays out some of that detail, maybe we file that with the actual initial filing.
Mhm.
So in doing so, we could clearly identify things like accruals or things like that we would strip off of the request.
Okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions on this form? Okay, great. I'm going to move on to WQTA 03. This form determines recoverable depreciation, property tax, and capital costs associated with the project. Property taxes must have been billed to be eligible, and depreciation rates must match those approved in your most recent rate case. Is this form understandable? What adjustments should be included in the final forms? And any changes or suggestions from the companies or OCC? Just give you a minute to digest it. Okay. Well, then if we're good, I will move on to the WQTA charge calculation and summary. Oh, sorry, Dan Lawrence.
So sorry I got in late, but that table just has a project number, not a project description. I don't know if that's helpful or not to have a description adjacent to it. Like in Wiki, you have numbers and descriptions.
Hmm.
You keep track of it. It's more of a, when you go back, you don't have to go back and forth with forms when you're trying to understand what you're looking at. So just
Sure.
a suggestion that we could carry over for consistency. That was all.
It's a great suggestion. Thank you. Okay. I will move on. Oh. Sorry, the Zoom user face was blocking the other tab. Okay, so this is the form where the WQTA charge is calculated through the rate of return on capital, cost, depreciation expense, property tax factors. The tax gross up are all calculated and consolidated into the annual WQTA charge. Form should have formulas, but be unlocked. And to clarify, investment should be the costs incurred for the projects. Is this structure of the revenue requirement calculation clear and consistent? Tax calculations transparent? And are there any suggestions for this form? This, of course, is another important one. Okay. Yes. Troy Dixon.
Sorry, it probably goes without saying, but with the depreciation expense, it notes that it's a composite. So essentially, I think what'll happen is the depreciation will actually be calculated within Form 1, Part 2, and the results will, in summary, carry forward here, and it'll effectively back into a composite rate. Just want to make sure that's what you're envisioning, because that's how I see it working anyway.
I'm inclined to agree with that, but not an accountant by training, so I don't want to be sure.
Yeah, so it'll be a
Right.
derived composite rate based on the specific rates
Yeah.
that apply.
We initially, again, modeled this after WICA, and WICA
Yeah.
was mostly T&D Maine. So a lot of times you were seeing the same depreciation rate. Here, you're going to have probably a spectrum of rates based on the project. So
That's an excellent point. I think we should clarify that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Yes.
I'll just, oh, sorry. I'll
ahead.
just add real quickly. Do we feel like the miscellaneous charges and sewer revenues or wastewater revenues, is that granular enough for our purposes for this type of reporting? Like in particular, like perhaps breaking out a few key categories like sales for resale to capture the wholesale relationship. You don't have to answer, but think about that as we look at the form, like each of these elements, to make sure we're going to have sufficient information going forward for tracking. And I see Mr. Zablowski has a comment as well.
Just to follow up on Mr. Dixon's depreciation calculation here. I mean, I imagine the same is going to apply for property taxes and anything that's, has a separate line item that will just be a sum of those in here as well, right?
Okay, thank you. There's any thoughts from the parties? Okay. And then,
Did you have anything additional, Mr. Dixon?
just to your point on the revenue base that's calculated down below.
Yeah.
So I think the important thing, and again, I've been doing this too long. I'm thinking back to when we originally did this for WICA, right? The whole idea of this part on revenue down below is to almost put our best guess as to a revenue figure so that when we assess the WQTA, that you end up with the right amount and you don't have a huge reconciliation to deal with. So I think there's probably instances where, maybe we'll just, there's maybe some recognized flexibility there to the extent that as we see things that we say, hey, this is in our numbers and we shouldn't be assessing it here, or we see that there's going to be a big impact. And if we do it this way, it'll produce a big surcharge next year or something. So again, because it almost doesn't matter what that number is down there because you're going to fix it in your reconciliation. So
Okay. That's a good point. And, and I think staff will confer about this, but you're always free to include more information that might be beneficial in terms of informing us and helping track these things over time. I'm not seeing anybody else right now.
okay. If not, I'll move ahead to Form 5. This form compares actual surcharge revenues collected. Any variance results in either a refund or a recovery adjustment using the specified interest rate for customer refunds. Are there any factors that the companies or OCC feel aren't captured in this page for WQTA recovery reconciliations? Okay. Give you a minute to read the form, but if not, I will move ahead. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Just a quick question on that. The interest rate applied to customer refunds. What does Pura envision that rate to be? Is that driven by statute or WAC or just
I
curious?
believe that will be based on the previous rate case, but I don't want to be sure about. Oh no, I will get back to you. Make sure that's specified and write a note in there to specify how that is calculated. So just writing that note. Okay. If there's any other thoughts, I'll move on. So Form 06 details surcharge revenues by period. The surcharge period itself is flexible based on a company's own billing cycles, be it monthly, quarterly, or otherwise. Read as schedules. Excuse me, and it will look familiar to those of you who filled out WICA form WICA 06. Is the purpose of this form clear? Column H should be updated to reflect the rest of this and not be reflected towards the schedules, which I think is a WICA holdover. Okay, not seeing any hands. We'll move on to WQTA 07, which is a details surcharge revenues by period and allocate the base revenues monthly. This just supports accuracy in calculating the surcharge percentages and reconciling collections. It again is analogous to WICA 07. Any questions on this form as well? Okay. I'll move on to this, more of a supplemental form that is highly flexible to the parties. This can be submitted in any format as long as it includes the following information: date, address, the complaint summary from customers. Is that flexibility clear? Is there anything that the parties feel should also be included? Yes, Mr. Sobolewski.
Just maybe potentially how the complaint was handled or resolved. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you for that.
I think we might consider also whether to add if there's any litigation or complaints to other regulatory bodies in relation to these particular complaints. Just to flag that.
Thank you for those thoughts. Yes, Joshua Unger, so your hand is raised.
Yes, I had can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just had a question. Is this specifically related to water quality complaints, not overall complaints for the company?
Excellent point. We imagine that this is related to complaints regarding the WQTA.
Okay, specifically similar to WICA. Okay.
Yes, and we should clarify that. Okay. Is anyone else? Oh,
Sorry, I can't get
see.
my hand raise function to work, but Commissioner Beecher, you asked about potentially other complaints. So this has typically been complaints, coming through our call center or whatever. Are you specifically, I think both us and Aquarion have pending litigation against us related to this. Is this where you would want to see a bit of a status on that or something, or?
I think that's important and I'm glad you raised it. I'm thinking more specifically if, say, a customer complaint rose to an individual claim of some kind, or a separate, a separate complaint, say, to another, one of our sister regulatory agencies, something like that. If there's anything, just saying, like, if there was something about that we should know about, let us know. But separately, yes, I think the authority would welcome being informed of of you know of issues that might be relevant in this area more broadly.
Okay.
There are no other comments on this form. I'm going to move forward to the revenue requirement calculation. This just shows how depreciation rates and property tax factors should be calculated. Is this form clear? Any questions? Okay, if not, I will be moving ahead. And as we discussed, just further samples for monitoring must track all PFAS test results used in calculating the running annual average calculation for each project. Includes each project's running annual average, the date of the sample, project number, and all WQTA related test results related to those samples. This is straightforward, but it's important data for us to, as Mr. Dixon said, regarding seeing the status of the project. Okay, seeing none. Oh, Mr. Spotsky?
Yeah, quick question on here. I mean, this might be better suited for like a written prompt, but will this have sampling results from like say previous 2 years that a previous treatment was in place, assuming the company has that data? Would that make sense?
The companies have thoughts about including such historical data before project treatment was in place. Is that your question? Just to clarify. It's certainly to be considered, I think, to clarify how much historical data should be included. As of right now, we have it written as all.
In other words, sort of a pre-test, post-test reporting or
Mm.
post-treatment, sorry, reporting.
The way I think about it is maybe this will like help maintain a record of previous treatment systems so we can look back and
Mhm.
the previous systems were able to treat.
Or is this something, this is another one I'd like you to think about how you report this information to the health regulators as far as, complying with any of their requirements as well. I could see this one could evolve into a table. So maybe express your views about that if you think, or at least like the beginnings of a table that could be modified as needed. That's something we could also think about. Ms. Bergman?
Hi, thank you. Just a comment on what Connecticut Water has done in our first filing. We provided all the data, the raw data that was used, as you have mentioned here, in the calculation of the running annual average. We were hoping that, to Dan Lawrence's point earlier about how the regulatory average is calculated with a reading below 4 treated as a 0. We were hoping that providing the raw data would, provide more visibility into what the actual samples were. We didn't include anything prior to 2024. We do have some earlier samples, but those were not included in the running annual average, or at least I should say, they were not included in the initial monitoring period. They were more for just, trying to get a handle on which sites we needed to start tracking. And we saw some variation. I think since then we've really refined our sampling and testing process. And so we provided the initial monitoring data that we felt more confident in.
That's helpful. Thank you. Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, you don't actually want lab reports, correct? Like you don't want backup lab reports, or do you want backup lab reports that says a lot? We've done that for some things, and that's a lot of work for people to look at, for one, right? Because it's a lot of data, a lot of piles of data. So just wanted to clarify that. Or was it just a tabular summary of the data, right?
I think that's something people can comment on, but it's not my understanding that was envisioned at this time, in particular, not to duplicate what you might have to do under, with the Department of Health.
Okay, thank you.
But that's just my opinion at this point. But yeah, feel free to weigh in on, for all parties, weigh in on those issues in your correspondence.
There are no other thoughts about this form. Oh, one more.
Sorry, one more. Not necessarily related to this tab itself, but I'm assuming there might be data we would like to see that obviously does not fit into an Excel format, such as, diagrams, treatments and things like that. So I imagine that'd be better up for a written prompt. There might be data OCC would like to see that doesn't neatly fit into a spreadsheet. Is all I'm writing down.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, Mr. Dixon.
I've never raised my hand so much in my life. I think for OCC, I think the important thing to note is, the water quality treatment adjustment report we intend that to be a living, breathing document. So every time we file one of these annual reports, as we did this year, we added 2 new projects that were not in the initial report. So as we added those 2 new reports, we submitted a whole pile of files related to supporting information on those projects. A lot of the information I think you're probably looking for. So I think it's intended to be as part of that living, breathing document that we continue to update the record for any of the rationale of why this project is even part of the discussion. So our intent is to do that, and I'm hoping the process that we started on is accomplishing that.
Thank you for that. And I like the idea of that living document because, and as we learn more, we may have new ideas. You may have new ideas to propose.
Okay. If there's nothing else on this, I'd like to move forward to discuss something that Mr. Dixon brought up earlier regarding cost documentation. During CWC's current WQTA reconciliation, we had sent out an interrog out for cost documentation to show that costs incurred were actually the costs incurred on a given project. CWC provided cost summary Excel sheets, one for each project, in RSR3, which was very helpful to go through. These spreadsheets show cost summaries for each cost category, the cost details from the general ledger, and a list of invoices tied to those costs. Providing this in the annual filing instead of an interrog, it will allow the authority time to review the costs and, say, hold an audit or another form of discovery if necessary to look further into those costs incurred. The authority is considering adding this as a requirement as part of the WQTA annual filing forms, instead of having to do an interrogatory later during the discovery process. Again, that would be providing a workbook for each project that has a worksheet summarizing the costs incurred, separated into categories, cost details for the general ledger, and again, a list of invoices that can be tied to those cost line items. Are there thoughts from the parties on such a requirement? Yes, Mr. Dixon.
I was trying to let others go first, but I think as a couple of things we recognize, a lot of this is modeled after WICA, but the big distinction, of course, is that what we're asking for recovery on is costs incurred as opposed to an in-service project. So I can appreciate the need to see some sort of documentation of the costs that are involved. I think the other aspect is, it's a 60-day proceeding, so there's very limited time to actually go through this. So I think adding that Excel documentation upfront to the initial filing is helpful in a truncated proceeding. The one thing I'd advise is, our last filing was roughly $7 million of costs, and it was a significant amount of invoices to pull just for $7 million, again, in a short period of time assembling this. So my hope would be in doing the upfront Excel work, the invoice providing could be limited to like a sampling basis or something, because we're at $7 million now, but next year we're going to be at 30 million, and then it's going to be at 60. It's going to be a massive amount of invoices. So I'd hate to get into the pattern of having to provide every supporting invoice if we could agree on sort of maybe a sampling approach, especially considering there is always the aspect that is like WICA, where there is a final review ability in the context of a general rate case. I think most of the decisions in WICA say, final prudency determinations will be at the time of a rate case or something. So there is, I'll call it another bite at the apple. But I think just in providing that level of invoices we have 30 days to put the filing together. You have 60 days to review it. I just hope to, especially considering there's probably a WICA filing going in at the same time and all the other things that are in front of you on a short basis. So I'd hate to have to provide that kind of volume of invoices if we don't have to.
Yeah, I think that's getting into issues of policy that the authority will certainly want to give some thought to. You know, what level of sampling or auditing might be applied to give assurance of the accuracy of the costs. And so yeah, I think that's certainly something we can discuss.
And I guess I'll just add the other thing that we have in the WICA proceedings is we have usually a day of inspections is assigned where, you know, Pura staff will come out and we may go see some projects. We may now have projects to visit during an inspection for WQTA if they're all in the works or at different various stages. But it could be maybe a bit of an audit day or something, sort of like an inspection, but you come and maybe we use that opportunity to review some of that cost information and provide additional support if it's required.
Okay, could the initial filing, for example, include a threshold for larger items to make sure that those are included, so sort of a modified sampling approach, you know, stratified sample, where the large, you know, upfront early on, we get documentation of projects of a certain size, and that we'd have to think about that, but you know, to sort of again provide sufficient information there, and while being efficient in the evaluation of the you know, lower magnitude expenses.
Any remaining thoughts or comments on this cost documentation subject idea? Okay, and well, moving on, that concludes the walkthrough of each individual form. Since we have time, I'd like to shift to general discussion of the WQTA process. Any thoughts on such as largest anticipated administrative burden with these new forms? Fields where Pura should provide more guidance or examples, or any other thoughts, generally speaking?
Hey, this is Tom Wheel. Can you guys hear me? I'm driving a car right now.
Yes. Yep. Loud and clear.
Thank you. Just following up on Mr. Dixon's last comment about audits. I mean, that makes sense to me. That's something we can certainly consider. I did just want to throw out there, if we're kind of having a general discussion about how the mechanism is going to operate moving forward and how we can kind of efficiently tackle the review in the truncated window. An issue that I've noticed with respect to audits, sort of the traditional way that they've, the traditional sort of interaction between audits and a proceeding or the record before Pura, there's sometimes a gap, right? Like Pura staff goes out, they take a look at an immense amount of material, and they have the opportunity to look at it there. But first of all, other parties don't necessarily have the opportunity to look at the same material, and that material isn't in the record unless it's somehow otherwise provided in discovery. But sometimes that's in and of itself administratively burdensome if it's thousands and thousands of pages of documents. So I just kind of wanted to throw out there, if someone has an idea of how to manage that, like the basic problem of we're doing an audit, but the record might not reflect sort of what happened in the audit, and also parties who weren't at the audit don't have the opportunity to kind of get a sense of what happened at the audit. Any thoughts on that?
Mr. Sobolewski? From OCC? Good morning.
Thanks, Commissioner Beecher. In regards to Commissioner Chairman Wheel's question, I think one of the things we used to do, and I'm not sure it was done in WICA, but um, I think it's possible we could do some of this as like a bulk filing, maybe that somehow, we have an electronic version somehow of some of the invoices. Maybe we should put a threshold on what those are, over some level, and those possibly could be provided. But, not necessarily looking for copies of all this, but somehow maybe it was a bulk filing that was made available to the parties or people who request it. I mean, I know we've participated in a lot of different audits over the years. I'm not sure and I think maybe earlier in the WICA phase, there might used to be even WICA audits, but I know they haven't been done as much lately. But, that's a possibility that somehow we can pick a threshold, maybe that here are the invoices over X amount, or there's a listing where people can pick and choose what they want to see.
Let's hear from Attorney Minikowski, and then we'll hear from the companies.
One thing, before I go,
sorry.
One of the things that, also there used to be like a computer run, a spreadsheet of maybe by project, right off their GL or accounts receivable or whatever, within a particular account. I'm sure the way the utilities organize that data is by project. So maybe there's a possibility that it's a computer run or something that's made available in digital format.
Thank you. Attorney Minikowski.
Thank you, Commissioner Beecher. Just to build off what Mr. Sobolewski just said, during the pandemic, we obviously couldn't do in-person audits for all PURA proceedings, so we had done them electronically, where essentially like a document list was sent to the utilities, and those documents were provided in electronic bulk filing that were then available for the parties to look at. Obviously, there's a burden in terms of work, associated with compiling that in a digital format, but that it has been done. So just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence.
All right, get to the mute button fast enough. I guess one of the options, and it came out so much data to look at as well for any one individual and even ourselves, would be to actually provide cost detail, which defines all the invoice values, what the contractors are, and a roll-up summary for each. And then you could figure out, as others have talked about, what threshold of invoices you want to see, but you at least see all the costs associated, not just one number. So that would be a kind of in-between process potentially.
Anyone else want to weigh in on this issue? Not seeing anyone.
I think Mr. Dixon and Mr. Jablowski have their hands up, Commissioner Beecher.
Oh, they're back up. All right, I'm
Yes, they're back
screening
up.
past. Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
Yeah, I think, we've seen audits over the years take on a pretty broad spectrum, ranging from sampling to having reams of paper waiting on a table for when the audit team arrives. I think to the extent that we agree that filing that general ledger documentation, or in terms of the Excel detail of charges runs with the initial filing, opens it up so that the audit can truly be used for that. Okay, let's hone in on one project and provide all the details on this one project, and then we can do that while the audit team is on site, or even I guess it could be virtually. But that way, we could then put that information on record, and it wouldn't be overly burdensome, as long as there are, we're looking at a sampling approach or something. I think that could be, I think it accomplishes a lot. It puts it out on the public record as well. So I think there's probably some middle ground to be reached on that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Sobolewski?
Question for Pura, and will Pura be performing inspections similar to WCAP? Because if it does, that does sort of function as a field audit of sorts, if you would, right? So all that's really left is the financial aspect of it, which would primarily involve looking at invoices, I imagine. That's something to think about.
I would say that's something we can certainly consider doing, doing site inspections. Certainly something to consider. Be a great idea.
Particularly when we're on a learning curve.
Yeah, I
So-
think, sorry I keep jumping in. I'm on a highway. I shouldn't even be doing this, trying to operate Zoom, but I couldn't find the raise hand function. Yeah, just throw out there, that makes sense to me. Just keeping in mind what Mr. Dixon said, because of the nature of this mechanism, at least in these kind of early days, I imagine some of this, because this is about recovery of actual incurred costs as opposed to plant actually in service, there might not be sites to inspect yet anyway, right? Like, and I guess depending on the work order we're looking at. I mean, that makes sense to me that a lot of this could just be invoices that haven't resulted in actual plant yet, right? Is that the case? I guess I'm throwing that out to the water companies. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think if you look at our current filing, I think there were 1 or 2 completed projects, and Lauren, keep me honest, we were probably asking for costs on 10, maybe, roughly. So there would be a couple, at least up front in our first one, we have 2 completed. I expect there'll be more next time. So there could be some inspections, but I would expect that there would be a heavy volume of the filing related to not as of yet completed work. That's a fair assessment.
I'd like to just jump in as Pura staff to say, staff, we do tend to find audits are helpful and efficient, and especially on-site audits, and we would agree with performing them.
Mr. Sobolewski?
Not to give this a negative connotation, but on projects that are in process, do you do like a drive-by inspection? Where you're just looking to see, yeah, we can see that there's some work being done at this site, or do you just go to the ones that are completed?
I mean, I think we're open to any of it, Rich. I think the challenge we'll always have is we'll have some coordination up front because, like Aquarian, we're spread out around the state. So we just got to be efficient in terms of how we do that. But, we coordinated up front. If we, indicate there's a certain project that's probably halfway through and we're in the middle of construction, we're happy to bring you along to that, and as well as any of the completed ones. So again, I think it's just as long as we coordinate to be as efficient as possible, we're fine with whatever you'd like to see.
Okay, thanks.
Again,
Sorry.
we'll get. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, well,
This will be
Chairman Wheel, I shall defer.
Sorry, this will be my last time jumping in. Just for my clarification, so when Mr. Dixon, when we're talking about projects that aren't in service yet, or like, could it be that you're looking to recover like just engineering or something, or planning costs where there really isn't any site work yet, but it's still eligible costs? And then there's like a spectrum of that, between that all the way to plant and service and everything in between. Do I understand that right?
Yeah, there is. And I think on that very detailed second form where the status of the project is, I think it'll say design, or it'll say construction, or it'll say complete. So I think you'd be able to, get a pretty good assessment from looking at the detailed sheet about what things you might be able to go out and see.
If I could ask, are you?
I
All
was-
right, go
I was
ahead.
just-
Go ahead
I was just
again.
I'm just saying thank you. I gotta stop before my wife kills me. No one tell my wife I was on this call while I was driving on the highway. Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
right. I'm gonna call her as soon as we're done. Will there be inspections from the public health or environmental regulators on these projects? At some point?
You do have to get a certificate of completion. So sometimes they come out and sometimes they request pictures. It depends on the project, but we have to file documentation to get a certificate of completion in order to put it in service.
Okay, so I think that's something else that could be, contemplated, and that is, having that information available to us relates to, successful completion of a project. So that's something to consider, to rather, in other words, again, to sort of rely on the authoritative inspection and, and evaluation of another state agency, that could be useful for us, if that makes sense. Do we have anybody else online, either from companies or the public or other interested parties who would like to offer up any comments at this point? Looks like we're kind of down to the core working group at this moment, but if anybody's there, please do, except for Chairman Wheel, please feel free to speak up. And just kidding, Chairman. But I want to emphasize again, we are open to correspondence from you based on our discussion today. And because I know some thoughts may come into everyone's head when we're done. Mr. Benedetti, do you want to lead us through next steps?
Sure. So this docket itself is closing at the end of March 31st. And then we'll take the comments proposed here today to publish them to our website for future proceedings. In the meantime, however, we welcome any comments or correspondences that the parties like to provide following this discussion, either for further context or other suggestions, etc. on this docket. We really appreciate your coordination and cooperation on this.
All right, I'll just, Mr. Unger?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. So when would the authority need those comments by?
That is not currently in the schedule for this docket, but I would say at least 2 weeks from now, Commissioner Beecher.
I think that seems reasonable. We will start to begin to take into account your feedback today. And then if you can get us written comments within, the 2-week period, I think that gives us enough time, to incorporate additional feedback. And if we need additional feedback from you, we might let you know that as well. But I think this seems very doable based on our discussion today. And I hope you found this to be helpful and constructive. And again, as the process goes on, we'll look forward to further feedback as appropriate to make sure we're getting this right. All right. Any other last minute issues, concerns? Right now, I think we might have done it. Pretty efficient process. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today, with the possible exception of one rogue chairman, but in his car, but no, just kidding, of course. So everyone have a safe day. Be careful. I guess the ice is on its way out, so we can be happy about that. Commissioner Cheeseman and I both had to kind of like take our lives into our hands getting from the parking lot this morning, but we made it. So everybody have a great day, and we will see you soon, hopefully. Take care.